Welcome to Running for Real, a global community with a shared love and curiosity for running. Together we reconnect with the reasons why we love to run and discover ways it helps us become better people. Whether it's the quiet moments of a morning run while the rest of the world still sleeps, or befriending the strangers next to you at the start line of a race, we are here to connect with others who see running as the common thread that weaves our lives together. Come join me, Tina Muir, as I talk with people from all walks of life, united by a love of running. Hello, my friends. Welcome to episode 308 of the Running for Real podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm excited that you are here. Now, for those of you who are new listeners, thank you for joining today. I'm excited to get to meet you and for you to get to meet my guest, or maybe you're a big fan of my guest already. For those of you who are loyally here every week, love hearing from you. Love that you are enjoying these episodes. So please let me know. There has been a pause on Together Runs lately. I apologize for that. It was because I literally could not find the mic anywhere. I looked all over. I know it's somewhere in my house. But I've now reached the point, it's been a month, I need to order another mic. So I have, but I apologize that the runs have been delayed. Okay, but just wanted to update you on that. Together Runs, by the way, are where I take a microphone with me, go on a run. We do some meditative aspects. We do body scans, senses check-in, nature check-in, all these meditative, calming, relaxing things. And then we have a conversation. And I promise you, it feels like you and I are running together. So if you haven't seen those, there are 52, 55 maybe of them. So you can go to runningforreal.com to go check those out. Now, today I am very excited to welcome one of my dear friends to the show, someone who has affected my life in such a positive way. He is such a role model for me, and he continues to influence me in just such a beautiful way. He's one of the most genuine humans I know. And every time I go to New York, he is the first person I reach out to. I love him dearly. He's met my kids. Our kids have met each other, and I love that. And I'm excited for you to get to know him. My dear friend Simran Jeet Singh is the executive director for the Aspen Institute's Religion and Society program, and he is the author of The Light We Give, How Sikh Wisdom Can Transform Your Life. He's also a professor of religion, and if you're interested, he's a Texan. We're going to talk a little bit about that today in the episode. So without any further ado, let's go meet my friend Simran. Legacy of Speed follows the transformation of a San Jose State track program in the 1960s. What started out as a second-tier state college no one outside of California had ever heard of, quickly became known as the home to Speed City. The guidance of one coach and his unconventional techniques launched the careers of the fastest sprinters of the day. Host Malcolm Gladwell, a competitive runner himself and former podcast guest on here, traces the journeys of those sprinters who went on to ignite a boycott movement and protest the 1968 Summer Olympics. Malcolm talks to Olympic athletes, sports journalists, performance coaches, and documentarians. And you'll hear from some of the best runners of all time, Tommy Smith, John Carlos, and Lee Evans. It's a story about athletes who dared to take a stand and the mentors who made them fast enough and brave enough to change the world. Find Legacy of Speed wherever you get your podcasts. Simran, my dear friend, welcome to the Running for Real podcast. I am excited to have you here, finally.
Thank you. Excited to be with you.
Yeah, it is. I feel like I've been gnawing at you for at least a year now, and I finally got you to cave with good reason. But it's taken me a long time, to which case my answer is why? Do you not like me?
No, this is awesome to get time with you. It's life is life. Even though we haven't been able to find time to record, we've still found time to hang out, which is
we did, yeah. Which I should. Yeah. I'm much happier with that. Selfishly, I would much rather spend time with you myself. Okay, I want to begin with a really important question. You ready?
Ready.
When I was finishing up in the final pages of The Light We Give, How Sikh Wisdom Can Transform Your Life, your new book, there was the kind of summary, one of the final points you were saying about was, or maybe not one of the final, but in the final section, you were talking about how when we are children, we think grown-ups have it all figured out. And now we see we are as confused as we were back then. We're kind of stumbling around in the dark, trying to figure out where we're going. I have to ask you, did Frozen 2 have any factor in that section? Because what came to mind for me was, this will all make sense when I am older.
Olaf,
so,
yeah.
Olaf, yeah. Was Olaf involved in your decision process there?
Olaf was not involved in the decision process, although he's one of my favorite characters of all time. I think it was really just me. It's a reflection that came up for me maybe a few years ago when my first daughter was born, and here's an even more embarrassing confession about it, which is, so my wife is a physician. And a woman. And so when our daughter was born, I remember sort of looking at her and being surprised that she didn't already know what to do. I was like, aren't you trained for this your whole life? Like, isn't there some like instinct that pops in? And of course there's not. And of course that's just like pure bias on my part. Mm-hmm. It was really like the expectation that for some reason or another, she would know what she's doing more than I would know what I'm doing, in a way that other people know what they're doing, and realizing, oh my God, like this is for us to figure out now. And so, yeah, that's probably my most embarrassing version of that story that I haven't really told before. But yeah, it really is this false assumption, false expectation that has caused me to feel some hurt because I'm not preparing myself sometimes in the ways that I need to. And I think causes all of us a little bit of hurt from time to time. Yeah,
so true. And I take it Ganesha knows about that, right? That you thought that. Have you told her since?
Well, she was the one who pointed it out to me, because it was like
I don't have all the answers.
Like, oh, we did. And I was like, what do you think? And she was like, why do you think I think anything? And yeah, so I mean, we haven't had the direct conversation about why I thought that she would know, but definitely there were moments where she would look at me and be like, "Is there some reason why you would expect that I've done this before? This is my first time around too." So yeah, and then
you've got the science from the education and this mothering instinct. That's all you need, right?
Yeah. Didn't you study all this stuff growing up?
Well, yeah. I think in general it is funny thinking that about, and that's why I brought up that Olaf thing, because whenever I half pay attention to for the 15th time that section, I am like, there's obviously some funny bits in here because they're trying to keep adults entertained, but it is very true that we all assume when we're younger that, like, yeah, everything will make sense and we'll know where we're going. But then even as we progress, and even as you think you have something figured out, life has a curveball to throw your way to change your ability to be able to think it's easy and you've got it down. So yeah, I just thought it was funny when I was reading that at the end. Maybe it's because Frozen 2 is one in our regular rotation, as is one that you and I both, our kids both love, Mira Royal Detective.
That's true. That's also that's a loved one in our house.
Mm-hmm, yes. Okay, let's get into some running stuff. We are going to talk about the book, The Light We Give. But I want to begin, this is a running podcast, with a little bit about your running journey. Now, one thing I actually didn't know, I know you've done New York 5 times. Is that correct? New York Marathon?
Right. New York 5 times, yeah.
Have you done any other marathons?
Unofficially.
Big events? Okay, what does that mean?
Popped in unofficially and did the Detroit with a friend.
Okay.
Well, it was unofficial also because.
Am I getting you in trouble here with this?
No, we were signed up for the half, but his dream was always to run a full, and he was feeling good about 10 miles in, and he said, "Let's try for it." So
Wow.
it was a fun one because it's the only one I've done really as in a supportive role. And for whatever reason, way more fun than doing it for yourself. So I really enjoyed that one.
And that's pretty. And did he enjoy it? I mean, saying it at 10 miles and saying it at 22 miles are two different things.
Yeah.
So feeling good at 10, he still did okay?
He did okay. He was struggling because, he hadn't prepared either in terms of his training or the days before to run the full. But he really felt like this was his chance to run a full. He thought this would be. He just wanted to do one, and unlike a lot of us, he was able to do one and stop and not sign up for more. So he was really. I mean, in a way that you don't often see, he was just so happy when he crossed the finish line, even though he was exhausted and all that. To him, it was like I didn't think I'd ever be able to do this, and I did it.
And do you have any desire to do other ones around? I mean, 5 times of doing New York, you obviously, well, I say obviously, but you live in New York, so that makes sense. But do you have any desire to go check out other ones?
I do. I have a bunch on my list. I think, with the pandemic and my daughters being so young, my ability to give time towards training has really gone down the last few years. So it's hard to, you're in a phase of life where things are one way and it's hard to see around the corner. But I know I'll have more time in the coming years as the kids are getting older. I'm starting to find more time to train again now. And the big ones on my list, I mean, obviously there's the majors, and those would be really fun to do around the world, just as a way of seeing the world. But the big one in the States that I'm dreaming about is the Big Sur.
Oh, I want to do that one too. Can we do it together? I want to do that one.
Yeah, let's do that one together. I mean, it seems like the kind of race that would be more fun together. You know how some are more like, even New York, I enjoy on my own and taking it all in, but Big Sur feels like it would be a really, really fun one to do with a friend.
People often comment to me about how the smells at Big Sur are amazing, and I'm really curious, what does that mean? I mean, obviously, we know what we appreciate as a nice smell, but it must mean there's lots of different nice smells coming through. So yes, let's put that on the plan for the next 5-10 years. Yeah, okay, I want to go backwards though.
Living in New York and having run the New York City Marathon a few times, there are different kinds of smells. So I'll be excited and surprised to smell anything nice during a marathon.
Yeah, there you go. Compared to New York, that will be. I mean, there's some good smells in New York, but I think heavily outweighed by the bad smells in New York. So let's put that on the list to see how sharp an adjustment we can make it. I want to go backwards though, for people who don't know you as well as I do. Now, you ran cross country in high school, but that wasn't your favorite thing. Was that just a means of getting fit for your true love, which was soccer or football, as it's actually called?
Yeah, it really was. I mean, you say it wasn't my favorite thing. I would say I did not like it.
I was trying to not continue the narrative that people have of running as punishment. You're just adding to this.
It wasn't punishment. I mean, we would, on my soccer team growing up, running was, part of the training, but it was also punishment. So, and I mean, it makes sense. And we would run a ton in soccer, and I was reasonably good at it. I wasn't terrible. I was fast when I was chasing a ball. I could run on the field the entire match if there was a ball to chase. But I wasn't as fast on the track or in a meet. And so there wasn't really for a long time any really draw to run in high school. I sort of, as I got more serious in my soccer and was starting to look for college and to go pro, I realized that I wanted to not just be good, but I wanted to be great. And so that's when I signed up for the cross country team. And a big part of it actually was that most of my closest friends from high school were on the cross country team. So it became this like social thing at first where I would go hang out with them, especially the pasta parties before the meets. And we would, just have a ton of fun. And And then I'd start to run with them, and soon, one thing led to another, and I was signed up. But I have to admit that I think because of my soccer schedule, the meets were usually on Saturdays. My matches were usually on Saturdays, and I think I probably made 2 or 3 meets in my whole career because I prioritized soccer over cross country. So I was on the team, but I wasn't, by any means a star or committed. I just did it to do it, and was, there every morning for practice, but wasn't always able to make the meets.
Yeah. And so for you, the running aspect was not even second, but it was just almost a means to an end, right? You were getting the fitness that could help you with your soccer, but you were getting the social part, which was being with your friends. Would you say that is very different to what it is right now for you? Or have you in some ways gone back to that original premise, however, inserting health for fitness in soccer?
It's a good question. Yeah. So, okay. When I was younger, running was very much, as you're saying, a vehicle to get somewhere, to accomplish something that I wanted to. And it was very much I saw it as a supplement, like almost like a medicine that I had to do, and to get over with. Like our practices would be in the mornings, and I would be happier when they were done than when they started. Right? Like I just wanted to get it done. And now it's very much the opposite, and I think this is especially true for me over the past couple of years through the pandemic, where running over time really became my escape. Now I would call it something like my source for mental health and personal time. It really started for me when I moved to Boston after college, and was living on my own for the first time. And it was grad school, and it was very busy and intense. It was Harvard. Like you don't mess around there. And so I would find myself wanting to step away, not sure what to do. And a lot of times I'd play soccer, but when there weren't people to play with, then what do you do? And so I would put on my sneakers and just go for little jogs on the Charles River. And that's where things really started to turn into, this is something I enjoy and gives me joy, and I don't really need any other reason to do this. Like, it's just something that makes me happy. And I would tell my friends back home from high school that I was starting to run and starting to enjoy it, and they would not believe me because they had known how I felt about running up until that point. So yeah, that's when it really changed. And now it's totally different for me, where, that's a lot of times that's actually the best part of my day, where maybe the way to say it is that's where I feel most free, where I don't have the mental weight of, here's what I need to do for the kids at home. Here's what I need to do for work. This is like my real thinking time. And actually often it's where my best creative thinking happens, in terms of, the writing that I'm doing. And so, yeah, it's very different now from what it was 20 years ago or so.
And I take it you don't listen to anything, or you like to be free of distractions in that way?
Usually, sometimes if I'm teaching something, and I need to read, a lot of times I'll pop in a book. And, initially when I first started writing and I tried to do books, I would be so bored that it would make me stop sooner. Like I would they would drain the energy from me. And now I guess because the books are necessary and out of obligation, I find myself being able to go farther, and go longer. And that's also a function of, I don't know, it's almost like this, you can be productive and get your workout in and enjoy yourself and knock something off the checklist at the same time. So like that all feels good, but when I do that, I don't always feel like I am refreshed in the same way as when I'm not listening to something and just enjoying being outdoors on my own.
Thank you to Athletic Greens for sponsoring this episode of the Running For Real podcast. Now, we know it's summer. Well, for most of us. Some of us it's probably winter. For most of us, it is summer. It is the time to be traveling. It is the time to be going to explore, whether it's near home or whether it's further from home. You are likely not in your usual routine, and that means it can be difficult to get the foods that we need to get into our bodies. I know that I am particularly guilty of this time of year, just grabbing for the easiest thing to go find, and I'm not maybe paying attention to what fruits and vegetables are going in my body as I should be. That said, I wake up every morning and the first thing I do, I've mentioned this so many times, the first thing I do is take my Athletic Greens, even if there is only a 20-minute window from when I wake up, which I currently am at 5 a.m., and get out the door for my run at 5:20. I still manage to take my Athletic Greens down. It's a little bit of calories, also gets me started for the day. It promotes my gut health, supports immunity, it boosts energy, helps with recovery. All those things gives me this kickstart. It's like an insurance policy so that no matter what I do, no matter what I eat throughout the rest of the day, I have had that one serving of AG1, which delivered that high impact blend of 9 health products, which is our multivitamin, minerals, probiotics, adaptogens, and more. It's going to take care of your body, and it's going to allow you to just get on with your day. No matter what happens with your diet that day, you have some stuff in it. Now, you probably know that people like Tim Ferriss, Robin Arzon, Lewis Hamilton, Michael Gervais, there's many more people who love Athletic Greens. And once you give it a try, you will absolutely see what I and so many others are talking about. It is gluten-free. There's no eggs in it, no sugar added. It's nut-free, dairy-free. So no matter what your diet is, you will make it work for you. When you sign up, we're going to athleticgreens.com/Tina. You can get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3 plus K2 plus some travel packs. Those travel packs are things you can go use as you are exploring the world, especially this year as we are finally able to maybe get away from home a little bit more. So go to athleticgreens.com/Tina to go check it out. Yeah, that's so interesting. I've had a lot of conversations about this actually, because I've been through phases. When I was running as an elite, I rarely listened to music. And then once I wasn't, when I came back into it through pregnancies, and then after that, I was very much always listening to something. And I felt the same thing as you said with audiobooks, particularly non-fictional books where you're trying to, as you said, pay attention or listen. I felt I'd either zone out on the thought and come back and be like, I have no idea what this person is talking about. Or I felt so drained to where I was like, I can't listen to this anymore. This is too, like, I can't concentrate. I felt like I almost needed it on like half time because I couldn't process quick enough. But then late last year, I stopped listening, or someone actually on the podcast, Mishka Shubali, challenged me to not run with anything for a month. And I did it. And then 1 turned into 2, turned into 3, turned into 4. And now I'm probably like 6-8 months after that, and I will occasionally listen to things. But when you take the idea of running without something, when you're either used to it or when you think about just running without something, you think, oh, it's going to feel so much longer. Of course, I need that distraction. But when you get out there, as you said, that creative time and the things that start coming through, particularly in that final 10 minutes, regardless of how long your run is, it's really magical that processing you're able to do and the things that you recognize. So I appreciate you sharing that you most of the time don't. Sometimes you will, but at the end of the day, when you can, you come back to the stillness. And
well, I think one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot, especially through the pandemic, is that I think it's become clear to all of us that we are uncomfortable with alone time. That we're so, and I think over the pandemic, some of us have gotten better at that, but we're so used to filling our time with distractions that we never take the time to really connect with ourselves. And that's true. That's true for me too, by the way. And it's something that feels really easy to do in a place like New York City, where there's always something to look at. There's always something to go see. There's always something to do. And really taking the opportunity to say, hey, you know what, that's all good. And that stuff's fun and I'll do it. But I also want to take some time for myself, not just for myself, but also to connect. And I'll tell you an interesting experience I had a few days ago that's relevant. I drop my kids at preschool. My older daughter's in elementary, and then I go drop my younger daughter at preschool, and then I walk home. And I pretty much every day on my walk home, it's about a mile, I put in my headphones and listen to the news on a podcast. And this day I had forgotten my headphones, and I was annoyed because I was like, what am I going to do for this entire 20 minutes that I'm walking home? And I'll tell you, within those 20 minutes, I was walking down from Madison Avenue. I was walking towards 3rd, and right at 3rd, there's a church where there's a guy for years. He's been out there with his Trump t-shirts and his pickup truck, and he works every day. He's out there. He's cleaning the sidewalk as I walk by, and I, have my assumptions about him, and I assume that he has his assumptions about me. And I was carrying the girls' scooters as I walked by, and this time I didn't have my headphones in. And he looked at me and he said, "Good morning. And how are you going to ride both of those scooters at the same time?" And, it was a dumb joke, like whatever, but this is New York. Like, you're not really supposed to talk to each other. I'd seen this man for the last 2 years, just walking by him every day. This was the first time he said something to me, and it was normal. Like, it was kind. He was just saying good morning, and it totally changed. It wouldn't have happened if I had my headphones in. I mean, it hadn't for 2 years. And then I'm walking down the street and I hear an older woman. I was near First Avenue. She was trying to catch the bus, and the bus was going to close its doors. But I heard her shouting for the bus to stop. She was carrying 2 big shopping bags. And so I was just walking by the bus, and I asked the bus driver, I said, "There's a woman there. Can you wait for a second?" And he did, which also doesn't always happen in New York.
Yeah.
And she came about 30 seconds later. It wasn't that long. She thanked me like 5 times, like I just saved her life or something. And I probably saved her some difficulty, but it wasn't a big deal. And then I'm walking to, down the street some more, and another woman, she drops her bags. And like now, all of a sudden, my experience with people is totally different just on this 20-minute walk.
Yeah.
She drops her bags, and I just help her pick them up and keep walking. And again, not a big deal. It's not like I'm some hero for picking up someone's bags that she dropped. But like, all of this is because my observation and relation and connection with the people around me is not disrupted by these distractions, which it is pretty much every other day. So it was just these like really small moments that within 20 minutes reminded me that, hey, maybe when you're distracting yourself, you're missing out on something that might be more important. So yeah, it's changed.
That's beautifully said. Thank you for sharing that. That's such an important point. It reminds me, that almost sounds like one of those inspirational videos you might see every now and again, where it's like one act of, those random act of kindness videos. It's like how it sets off a chain. It kind of almost sounds like that, but which very much is going to align with what we're about to talk about. But it's funny you mentioned that. Yesterday, I was actually having a catch up with Maria Vargas, who you met once, mutual friend. And she was saying about all these random things happening, and how by putting herself in a place and letting things come to her, like saying, okay, I've got a few hours, I'm just going to take my time here, rather than being like, I've got this, and then I'm going to do this, and I'm going to, put my headphones on for this. And she was saying all these things. And while we were sitting talking, as this woman hands her a note, and it says, "Hi, couldn't help but eavesdropping on your conversation. Love the energy, connection that you're saying. Here's my number. Would love to connect. Oh, and I work in podcasting," because her and I were talking about podcasts. And this woman just gave her a number and walked off.
Wow.
And
yeah.
I mean, I was like, wow, this is such a good example of leaving yourself open to connecting with other humans,
Right.
and what can happen if we don't overschedule ourselves and, as you said, distract yourself. So thank you for sharing that. That actually perfectly goes into the fact that in The Light We Give, you, a lot of the first half of the book is you working your way through, I guess, your own growth and maturity in terms of how you handle particularly incidents where people will, be insulting to you, will treat you in a very racist way because of the way you look, and because particularly since 9/11, and how you almost try these different methods of handling it, recognizing that most of them don't work until you finally start to see what does. So maybe this is your story. Give us a bit more information into your side of what I just said there, and how you've come to the place you are now, just to give a bit of a summary before we dive in deeper.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I'm realizing now that we're on audio and people can't see what I look like. And so it's probably helpful to note that I am a Sikh American, Sikh, and as part of my religious practice, I wear a turban. As part of my heritage, I don't cut my hair or shave my beard, and so I have a long beard. And I also, my parents immigrated from North India, from Punjab, and so I have brown skin, which gets pretty brown in the summertime. So here we come, and was very dark brown because I was always outdoors growing up in Texas. And so, growing up there, I was born and raised in San Antonio. I have three brothers, and we're all close in age, and we're all close in relationship even now. Growing up there, we were some of the only people who looked like us in all of South Texas. And so, yeah, the experience of trying to live every day as normal kids was very much a part of how we were. And, part of it was trying, and part of it was just living, right? Like we were into sports, and we enjoyed school and reading and movies and I mean, we were very much like normal, whatever that means for Americans. And then also we were different because our family came from a different country, and we spoke other languages, and we ate different food, and we looked different. And so it was an experience that I think a lot of people in this country and around the world have, of having multiple identities and not really being sure how exactly you fit into your society. And we had the added bonus, I guess, of happening to have a visible appearance that many people, especially after 9/11, considered to match what they presumed to be the enemy. So it wasn't uncommon, even before 9/11, but especially after, for people to make all sorts of really strong, assumptions is the word I was going to say, but it feels like it was more than an assumption. Like they had really strong feelings and reactions anytime they would see us on the street. And so that was very much a part of our lived experience. It still is in a lot of ways. And that's, all over the place. It was in school, it was in the workplace, it's at the grocery store. It's, it can be in Texas, it can be in Boston, it can be in New York, it could be while I'm running, which has happened quite a bit. I mean, it's just part of the daily lived experience. And so the big question for us that we had to figure out, and I think a lot of people have to figure this out because of who they are and what they look like. But it was, how do you accept the reality that is your life and the way people perceive you, and also not tie your feeling of self-worth or your experience of this world? How do you live so that it's not tied to other people's perceptions of you? And in some ways that's really easy, right? Like I tell my kids now, don't worry about what other people think. It's, you have value on the inside, and they get that. Like it's simple. But when it's every day and it's constantly socialized and you're getting these messages too, and you internalize them, it can be really tricky. And so that was a big part of the experience. And that's sort of the story that I try and share in the early part of the book, so that I can help for people who haven't walked in my shoes or shoes like mine. It's an opportunity for people to go through that journey with me and perhaps uncover some possibilities for their own life as well.
I want to read to you a quote, if I may. Is that okay to read you back one of your quotes?
You better than me reading it, so sure.
By the way, I should mention to everyone, I already texted you about this, but throughout the book, Simran's put like these little brackets with little side comments throughout the book, and they're just like perfectly his sense of humor, which I just loved every single one of them. They made me smile, but it just brings so much personality to the book, and I love that people hearing this are getting to experience that. But it's just so good in the book. I've already told you this, but I just want to embarrass you for a second.
Thank you.
That's another perk of the book.
That is the most important part of the book. Like, I just need people to realize that my 6-year-old now starts calling out my dad jokes, and so I feel like that window is closing, and I need other people to recognize that I'm hilarious. And so,
I'll be your friend that keeps bringing that up and saying that you're funny, because you are. But I think it's the same kind of humor that I have, actually, because a lot of the things you wrote, I'm like, yeah, I would say that. So I think that's why I love it. Anyway, okay, so reading this back to you. So life is I think you were talking about kind of what we were talking about seeing. Well, we haven't actually mentioned about seeing humanity in others, although you did mention it with the people you saw while you were walking back from school that day. But talking about creating equity and just being able to handle these things that are thrown your way based on the way that you look. So you put life as a Sikh, someone who follows a Sikh faith, Sikh practice. It's a constant interplay of being visibly distinct in how we look, which triggers people's fears, anxieties, and racism, and of being rendered invisible when it comes to inclusion, representation, and belonging. Could you maybe expand on that? You've obviously mentioned the first half of that, but maybe the second part too.
Yeah. It's this interesting experience. And I was talking to my wife about this recently, because she's a human rights researcher, and it's fascinating. She's a physician, and she could have a much easier career and less emotionally taxing experience in this world if she didn't constantly work with refugees. And I was asking her, why do you care so much? And she said, well, I mean, I know this, right? Like, it's not like I haven't talked to my wife in the 15 years we've been married. Like, I know where she's coming from, but she said it in a way that really struck me. And she said, I know what it feels like, and I just hate to see other people go through it. And it's that simple. Like, the empathy that she has for people. Her family came as refugees, escaping political violence. Her father was almost killed in an attack where he was beaten almost to death and left for dead. And her sharing her ability to connect her personal experience with others, right? That's empathy. That's compassion. And she says, that's it. Like, I just can't stand to see people being mistreated. And I feel the same way. Like, that to me, and especially with kids, it's just, I know what it feels like. I haven't, I mean, as you've read the book, you'll understand this, and many people don't, but in a lot of ways, I've faced a lot of challenges in my life by virtue of how I look and how this country perceives me. But in a lot of ways, I haven't. And I have not had the worst of it. I haven't been beaten and left for dead as my father-in-law and many of my friends actually have been attacked. I haven't lost a job over discrimination. And I've had other kinds of opportunities I've lost, but it hasn't been make or break, I guess is a way to say it. but I know what it feels like, and I see it happening to other people. And, it's on the basis of all kinds of experiences and identities, right? Whether it's their sexual orientation or their gender or their race or whatever it is. But it's just, there's something that wells up inside of me when I see that. And again, especially when it's with kids. And I think it's this vision that I draw from my faith that, yeah, life is hard and life can be challenging, but it doesn't have to be this hard. And there are other ways we can live. And I think that to me is probably the most animating element of my reaction. It's knowing that there's a different way. I think if I didn't know the other possibilities, and this is speaking as a historian who's studied different cultures and communities around the world, different ways of thinking, different approaches to relating to other people. And, it can be hard in America to get into our own bubble and think this is the only way, or ours is ours is the best way, right? We say that all the time. Mm-hmm. And in some ways there are a lot of advantages and opportunities we have that others don't. But in some ways we just keep holding on to this way of thinking that just causes us more pain constantly. And so to be able to get out of that mindset and that culture requires a little more humility and the recognition that there are other ways. And I feel like those exist. And once we can imagine those, once we know those possibilities, then we can imagine for ourselves how we can create them. And so it's in those moments where I'm like, man, if we just knew, if we just tried to do something a little bit different, all of our lives could be so much better. And so that's a big driver for me in terms of, I think, why I care so much about this.
Yeah. So you mentioned there about the kind of this pain that we go through, the situations that we find ourselves in. And as we are well aware, there is a lot of anger right now. I mean, it's hard not to find yourself pulled into things. As we know, we're in a very polarized world, but we just feel so much helplessness and too many things we've got to sort out, that there's a lot of anger in us right now. You talked a lot in the book about humanity, seeing humanity in ourselves and in one another, and how that will help us with so much of that pain, which is we put on ourselves in many ways on a daily basis. Now that relates to what you were just talking about there in terms of how your Sikh tradition teaches you to see that we're all interconnected, that we are, what was the I have it written here somewhere. Onika. One divinity, one connectedness, one world, everything like that. So however you want to take that, wherever you want to go with that, but just tell us a little bit more about this dehumanization that we experience and how that is actually making life harder for us. But the more we can see ourselves as connected and as humans that are connected, the better off we will be.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting thing. I mean, I remember your questions reminding me of this feeling that I had in high school, where, I was a senior when the terrorist attacks of 9/11 happened, and one of this, there was a lot of, I mean, I think for many of us, a lot that we went through and experienced and learned from that time. And one of my experiences during that period was starting to understand the gap between how I saw myself and how other people saw me. Right? Like, other people would see me as a terrorist, as the enemy, as someone who was violent and hateful and misogynistic, and all these other terrible things. And I saw myself as someone who was trying to live the best of their values, right? Like service and justice and love. And it was in that recognition of this gap and trying to figure out how do you live when other people's perceptions of you are quite different from how you see yourself. How do you reconcile that gap, and how do you ensure, and this is something that I've learned more recently, that when the culture around you is constantly sending messages that you are inferior or less deserving, how do you get beyond that? And I think that's a really big question for us in today's world, where so much of our self-worth, our perception of our self-worth, is tied up in how other people see us, right? The validation, the external validation constantly. And, you can look to social media, you can look to, how we structure our friend circles and our communities. Like it's constantly a push and pull between those things. And so the teaching from the Sikh tradition that really helped me find an answer in this question it had to do with this concept of jyot, of divine light. And our teaching in our tradition is that everyone has it. Everyone has it equally. And it's something we learn early, and it's something that I think shaped my worldview from a young age. Like I think it's a simple enough concept that I got it, and it's how I see the world. The bigger challenge for me, actually, was learning to see it in myself. And I know that's not everyone's challenge, and sometimes it's flipped and sometimes it's not. But again, I think for people coming from the margins of society, it can be really difficult to overcome the constant negative messages that we receive that we're inferior. And I had taken some of that in. And one of the moments I remember, one of the teachings that really helped challenge these, like what I had built up inside of me, was a line from the third Sikh guru, the third Sikh prophet. And he says, "Man tu jyot sarup hai, apna mool pachan," which means, "Oh my mind, oh my heart, you are the divine light. Recognize your origin. Apna mool pachan, recognize who you are, recognize where you come from." And I mean, again, like in theory, I knew it, but I had never really felt like I also was divine or had the light. And it was such an eye-opening experience for me to recognize, hey, you know what? Like I philosophically believe that the divine light is in everyone, and I try and live that way and see that in everyone. And that's great. But what about myself? And it's almost like one of those, like, you might have some of these in your life too, that one of those moments where you're like, oh, obviously this is what I should have been seeing all along.
Yeah.
And I can't believe that I missed it. It was sitting right under my nose the whole time, right? Like this is the teaching. And so, but it completely transformed for me the ability to see not just the divine light in the people all around me, but also in myself. And that created what I would say is it creates a different kind of balance, right? Like if you see the good in others, but not in yourself, that's imbalanced. And if you see it in yourself and not in others, then that's not great either, right? Like that creates trouble. But being able to live with those two conceptions, those two experiences where you are seeing it in yourself and in others, that produces a different kind of experience where you are joyful internally and also in your relationships around the world. So it was a really big experience for me there.
Thank you to Paceline for sponsoring this episode of the Running for Real podcast. The Paceline card is the first credit card with cash back powered by your workout data. Yes, that means your runs. Now, I just want to say, even if you aren't running right now, even if you're injured or something is meaning that running is not in your life, anything that gets your heart rate higher than a brisk walk counts towards your 150 minutes. When you hit 150 minutes, you will get up to 5% cash back on health and wellness purchases like your running fuel and your gear. Terms and conditions apply, so you can find out more at paceline.fit. But Paceline believes you should be rewarded for being healthy. And people who are physically active for about 150 minutes per week have an estimated 33% lower risk of all-cause mortality, basically any kind of death, than those who are not active. That's good for you and good for the world. And I want to just mention some of the places where you can get up to 5% cash back. So Trader Joe's, Whole Foods, REI, where we get our running gear, all those purchases, we can get up to 5% cash back. So you can apply for the card by getting more out of your miles by going to download the Paceline app from the App Store that you use and use code TINA. You will apply for the card. If you are accepted, you will be able to get that up to 5% cash back. Join me. I am not someone who has a lot of credit cards. I am actually very picky about which credit cards I get. I have very few, actually, I'll be honest. I had 2, now I have 3. That's all I've ever had in my life. I really am picky about these, and I love this one. I love that just running is giving me that extra bonus. And by the way, there's 3% cash back on everything else. Plus, card members can get reimbursed for the latest Apple Watch if you want to use that. And this app works by connecting with your Apple Watch, with your Garmin, so that you don't have to do anything other than logging into the app. So start getting more out of your miles, literally, by applying for the Paceline card today. Make sure you use code TINA when you download the app from the App Store. Go check out paceline.fit for more. You wrote about this in the book about realizing that you were able to, see that light in other people, and yet yourself, you were still always feeling like you weren't good enough, and that you needed that external validation of whatever it may be, of grades, of approval, of social media, of whatever it may be, and saying, hey, why do I need this to still never feel good enough? And yet I can see light in everyone else. And I really appreciated that part, as I, like you, have little girls who are, well, I guess kids who are very curious. And I'd been struggling with the concept of my 4-year-old, now very, as you know yourself, like Bailey is very thoughtful, very reflective, very empathic. And she always asks about people doing things that are wrong. Like, actually, I haven't mentioned this before, but she's been on a kick lately of asking me all about people that don't have things. Like, do some people not have eyes? Do some people not have arms? And kind of going through and asking those questions. And she was asking one day if I knew anyone who didn't have a leg. And I mentioned about Adrian Hazlitt. I said, yeah, I do know someone. And then she said, well, why? And then I thought, now I'm getting into a hole. And so I kind of said, like, okay, someone made a bad choice. And she said, well, why? And we kept digging, but trying to explain to her understanding, and even in myself, how people can make choices that are, I mean, in that example, right? Very, very harmful, hard, really hard. Same as you mentioned about Wade Michael Page. That was his name, right?
Right.
And learning to understand the motives and learning to like reconcile with what someone did that really hurt people who, didn't deserve that. And with my daughter, trying to understand, how can I explain to her that it's not like bad, forever bad, you're evil, stay over there, and then here's all the good people over here. But like how people can make decisions. Reading what you wrote there really helped me to think, okay, well, everyone has this light in them. And it may be hard to see right now, but it's there. So maybe explain that concept, because that is definitely something going on right now. It's very easy for us to take someone and be like, you're evil, go over there. Like, we're done with you.
Yeah. I appreciate the question. I have to admit that.
Sorry, that was really long-winded and.
No, it was beautifully told. And I think your willingness to engage with your daughter through that. Thinking about it from a parenting perspective is helpful, because I think part of our challenge is that it's so much easier to give the simple answer. And, to just say, like, you could have just said to her, well, that was a bad person. And they're evil, and that's it, right? Like, you could have shut it down. And I think that's what we're so prone to do societally, right? And part of our polarization is to put people in boxes and to say, here are the bad guys, here's what they think, here's what they're out to do, and that's it. And we shut down every possibility of, let alone progress. We shut down conversations and relationships. And I have so many friends who have lost real relationships over the last few years, and it's really painful for them because of our inability to really take on that complexity of who we really are. And I think, part of what's worked for me, and I share this in the book a little bit too, is to develop enough humility. And this takes courage because it's uncomfortable, but I think the good news is you don't have to tell anyone when you first start. And so it can be your little secret. But developing enough humility to realize that the same terrible things that other people think and do are also inside of us too.
Yeah.
And, it's such a funny thing that we do. Like when we point to other people or point at other people and say they're wrong and they're messed up and they're hurting others, what we end up developing within ourselves is a false sense of perfection, right? We're constantly telling ourselves we would never do that. We would never think like that. And the truth is, we all think like that because this is what our culture teaches us. And instead of, there's the whole like shame and blame and all that kind of stuff, which I think is its own conversation. But I think here what I'm really talking about is our self-deception of deflecting other people's imperfections as a way. So our insistence that we are constantly right and our unwillingness to see our own imperfections and only deflect imperfection to other people leads us to a place where we're never really working on ourselves or giving ourselves the opportunity to grow. And that's really dangerous. And so for me, what that's looked like is to move out of this mindset, right? Like, so one of the challenges that I've had personally is that for so long, I just saw myself as a victim of racism, but not as someone who could possibly have racist ideas. Like, how it never made sense to me for so long. How could I have these ideas? I'm the one who's hurt by these ideas. And what I've had to learn to do is to recognize that for as part of the human experience, we're never just one thing and we're not on one side of the table. Usually there's both at play at the same time. And to recognize that I have these same imperfections and they might shape my behavior and how I treat people sometimes, as ugly and as painful as it is to accept that reality, it also makes it then easier to empathize with other people who might do things you would never do. Maybe is the easiest way to say, or might do things you wouldn't expect yourself to do.
Yeah.
And the last thing I'll say there is grappling, or maybe it's not even grappling. I think it's being more aware of our tendency as humans to have ideals and aspirations, but not always live up to them. Right. Like, and I do this in all elements of my life, right? Like I'll lose my patience with my daughter sometimes. I will eat some things that I know I'm not supposed to, a lot of the time. And I may not get up to run one morning when I've told myself, we do this constantly, but then we have this forgiveness for ourselves and say, well, that's just me. That's just life. But then when other people do it, all of a sudden we want to say, well, that was messed up. And how could you possibly, how do you dare to be a hypocrite between, what you say you'll do and what you actually do? Like that's unforgivable. And so I think learning to have more grace with other people in the way we do ourselves is a place where we need to start going together.
So true, so true. One thing that's coming to mind as you were sharing that was you mentioned about the sitting on a plane and having a kind of interaction with someone who you had your assumption about them, you suspect they had their assumptions about you. There was a moment where you made a choice to make a connection, even though you didn't need to. You could have easily just kind of like, like huffed and at this interaction, and then just added it to your list of things. You mentioned about being the victim, but list of things that just happened to me because of who I am. But you chose to overcome that, and you chose to speak to this man, and you had a great conversation, and you really broke down one of those opportunities that you had the door open to change that. And I really love that. And I don't want to go into that anymore right now. I'll encourage people to read it in the book, but I do want to come around to the final piece of the book being about Seva, which is, how we are all, our world is fundamentally interconnected. This way, what we've been talking about just here, of caring for ourselves and caring for others, but talking about acts of service. Now, the way you in the book wrote about these acts of service is different to maybe what is coming to mind for many people listening right now. So tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, so it's a really important part, I think, of my experience in this world and what my faith teaches me. And I think there's something really powerful about this concept that could help a lot of us as we think about how we interact with one another, and also how we make our world a better place. Mm-hmm. But I think maybe the place to begin is to say that I work with a lot of different activists and advocates in all sorts of spaces, and one of the shortcomings, I think, in the way we think about service and activism in America today is that it's so limited to what we do. And what I mean by that is we focus on actions. We count the metrics. We look at outcomes, and what we don't do really is examine what's in our hearts as we engage. And I think there are a few opportunities for us to grow how we think about producing justice in this society. And one of them, and this I think is fundamental to Sikh teachings, is that it doesn't just matter what you do, it also matters what's in your heart when you do it. And someone might say, well, what's the difference, right? We're really measuring the impact. And I would argue that there is a potential for the impact to serve you as an individual too, that you can find more joy in this world. And I would also argue that justice, producing justice and making our world a better place isn't just about measuring what we do. And what I mean by that is when we are constantly responding to difficult moments, to the challenges or inequities around us, and we're doing it out of anger, then in so many ways, our outcomes, whatever we produce, whatever we create, will have those same kinds of inequities within them, right? We're never going to create a sustainable, here's how we fix the problems. We're just creating new problems at the end. And we've seen that over and over again in our attempts to create solutions. That when it's driven by anger or rage rather than love, it's not going to get us very far. The other point about this approach, love-inspired service, is that there's a way we can approach our relationship to the world and one another in a way that makes us happier too. And here's what I want to say about that. I mean, I've experienced this most recently with the pandemic, which I would say, for a lot of us, we spent a lot of time at home. We worried a lot about what would happen to us and our kids, and our families and our loved ones. And we became really wrapped up in our own worlds. I mean, that was true for me in my apartment in New York City. Like that was our world, and that was all that mattered. Mm-hmm. And of course, like in a matter of survival, that does matter. But I over time became so self-engrossed with us, and it really like got me in this negative cycle, mentally. And the way out, I found, was by starting to serve other people who were suffering. And I think what worked there was that it gave me perspective that, yes, my life was difficult and I had my challenges, but other people's lives were difficult too. And I wasn't the only one feeling like it wasn't so isolating anymore. And more than that, I was reminded in serving other people that I had a lot to be grateful for, things that they might not have had, or even things that they did, but I was starting to take for granted. Food, shelter. A lot of people lost their homes. Health. We were relatively healthy. I mean, all sorts of things that I hadn't really considered. And so I guess the point here is that if it is our self-centeredness that causes us so much suffering, that makes us feel disconnected from the world around us or from ourselves, then the antidote is love-inspired service, seva, which as we practice it, helps to reduce the ego and helps us feel more connected with ourselves and the people around us. And so that's a teaching from the Sikh tradition that, I'd heard it philosophically a lot over the years, but I'd never really felt the power of it in the way that I did over the past few years. And so now I'm starting to see how this daily practice of serving others is both about expressing our love, right, and producing more justice, but also creating on-ramps for us to feel more happiness in our day-to-day lives.
Everything you're saying makes total sense to me. You explained it beautifully there, and the book is even clearer with just the level of detail you can get into. However, you mentioned about being grounded in love, and you didn't say the words, but in the book you talked about peak outrage culture and performative outrage in terms of, if it's not grounded in love and connection, then it's going to be short-lived and it's going to be, kind of burn out very quickly. But how you also talked about the difference between being confident and feeling superiority. How, when we've been almost ingrained to do these things of like, I'm going to do this because, maybe that'll make me look good on social media, or maybe then people will say, oh, well done, you did this. Like, it reminds me of a conversation I had with someone years ago about, like, is there truly an altruistic act? Because, you're always going to have that feel-good feeling. If someone is struggling with the concept of how do I actually go about this, when, if I'm honest with myself, I maybe have been doing things, out of, performance outrage, or maybe even just I've been doing these acts of service because if I go to the food bank, then everyone and volunteer there, everyone around me will be like, oh, that's so amazing you do that. How can someone get themselves out of that?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I mean, I imagine this, I think it's a constant question, right? It's not a matter of simply pulling yourself out. And I say that as someone who's tried to live by this over the years. And there are always enticements, and there are always mind games that you can play with yourself to convince yourself that I'm not really doing this for me. I'm really doing it for other people. And, we're human beings are a funny species. Like we trick ourselves all the time into believing that we're doing the right thing, even though we know in our hearts that we're not. And I think, for me, and I share this in the book too, that to really create a sense of authenticity, of really learning to live by your principles, really learning to practice what you preach, it's not an overnight thing. It requires daily practice and daily introspection. And I think one of the ways that this has worked for me, on a really practical level, is to create a litmus test for yourself. And to go into when you're in this decision-making process, and right now it might be more unintentional, but you can make it more intentional by simply putting out a process for yourself when you're making a decision about what to say or what to do. And just ask yourself, why am I doing this? What are the real reasons? And challenge yourself to dig deeper so that you're not doing this self-deception game. And, it can be as simple as starting with why am I posting this thing on social media, right? Like I think that's a good place to start, because that's a medium where so many of us have become comfortable with pretending to be something we're not. And it's also, I'll say honestly again, like it's really enticing there, because it's all set up to give you outcomes based on saying certain things. And it's constant. Like even now, as my book is coming out or you have your podcast, like you can easily say, if I make this compromise here in terms of my motivations, it's not a big deal, because it'll help what I need to do. And then next time I'll do the right thing, or I'll live by my values, or I'll be authentic. And I think what we all know, but maybe forget on purpose, or maybe it's not on purpose, I don't know, but we all do this. And it's this telling ourselves that this one time is not the big deal, that next time I'll do what I need to do. And this time we'll let it go. But I think what I've learned is sincere practice is what gets us to our goal. And if we're really trying, and it's not to say you need to be perfect and you need to make the right decision every time, but as long as you are pushing yourself to move forward, then you can have the strength, the fortitude to continue to make right decisions as you move along. And that's something I've learned through my experience as a racialized minority in this country. It's something I've learned as a husband and as a father. It's like, you can tell yourself whatever you want, but if you're not trying to get better, then you're not going to get better, right? It's like, it's that simple. It's training, it's practice every day. And I think that's the way to actually creating the results and the holistic feeling that I am who I say I am. Like, I think that's the only way to get there.
Thank you for that. Yeah. And I know I didn't ask that in a way that was that clear, because I kind of tied in two concepts that you talked about together, but I really appreciate you explaining that and your vulnerability with us, that it's not easy, because I think that gets us in trouble sometimes, right? Because someone might see you doing these things or hearing that, again, going back to that 20-minute walk, hearing those things and think, wow, what a good guy. I don't think I would have made those choices. And maybe someone wouldn't have in that moment, but that doesn't mean on the next 20-minute walk for them, whatever, or me, or wherever that is, you can't make one of those choices and help one of those people or speak to one of those people, and then keep working on it from there, looking for those little moments of connectedness of where you can improve for the sake of continuing to move in that direction, rather than like you helping to get that bus and then be like, hey, can we take a picture of this? Because I want to like say like I helped you today, you know? So I really appreciate that.
Yeah. I mean, just on that point, I think to me, that's one of the hard things about religion and spiritual. I mean, for me, at least, it was a really hard thing for me to see these exemplars, these people who are idealized and in many forms are some of the greatest people to walk on this earth, and you admire them. Then you also say, I could never be like that. Like, there's no way. And at least for me, there's like this defeatist mindset, which is like, well, if I can't get there, then what's the point in trying? And I mean, it's a similar thing to a lot of people with running, right? Like, if I can't do what these other people are doing, why should I do it? And I think the answer for me is you do what you can, and you get to where you are, and that's good enough for. I mean, it's not just good enough. There's real satisfaction in reaching for the best that you can be, and actually, it's not just about that feeling of finishing the race and saying I could do it. It's also the growth and the joy that comes through that process of strengthening yourself. And in that experience, it doesn't matter so much what life throws your way, because you have become more able to deal with those challenges and more confident in yourself and living into all the things that you say you want to be, and that removes so much of the doubts and the confusion that causes pain. So anyway, that was a really important part of my experience that, for so long I resisted, because I just didn't think it was within the realm of possibility for me. And I mean, it is important for me to say I'm very far from where I'd like to be, but I also see the value.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that. As much as I could continue for hours, and will selfishly take up hours of your time next time I can steal you away, we'll have to wrap up here. Is there anything else that we haven't covered yet that you just would like to remind people listening, that was something that came to you in the book, or while you were writing the book, or just you think people listening should know?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that I've been thinking about a lot recently, and especially this pertains to runners, I think, is that every moment in life is an opportunity to practice who we want to become. And I think this is something that feels intuitive for people who run, because this is how we've learned to understand our training, that there is an end goal, and that's important, and we can enjoy the journey along the way too. But if we learn to see life as an opportunity to grow and get stronger, rather than something we have to react to constantly, it creates a different kind of feeling and experience, where you can learn to love what you're doing and also use it as a vehicle to get to where you want to go. And so we've said that a few different ways in this conversation, but to me, that is a really different way of viewing our day-to-day living, rather than something that happens to us. It's something that we can control and enjoy and really get to where we want to be.
Ugh, but reacting is so easy to do. That's a lot of hard work you're asking for there, to not react to situations. We've got a lot to work on. Well, you are just a perfect, well, not perfect. You are a very good example of someone for us to continue to strive to be. I continue to look up to you as a human being, and I cherish our friendship so much. So thank you for joining me and letting the community get to know you. I've been very excited for this interview since I first met you on the internet, coming up on, it's probably a year and a half ago. So thank you for joining me. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for putting this beautiful book together. I cannot wait to hear what people think of it. And thanks for being the light you are in this world.
Thank you, Tina. Really enjoyed it.
Hi, friends. Just a quick message to say a big thank you to the Running for Real team. While I may be the face of Running for Real and the voice behind the podcast. There are a group of people who are working tirelessly to provide everything that runners could need within our community, to make our community stronger, better, and evolve and grow and learn from one another. We are working really hard to make Running for Real the place we believe it can be within our community. I just want to take a moment to thank everyone on our team. That is Victoria, Stacey, Sandy, Sally, Maria, Kelsey, Kat, Jeremy, and Erica. I appreciate each and every one of you and the hard work that you put in. Now let's get back to the show. I am so appreciative of that conversation. To be totally honest with you, I said it to him and I'm going to say it to you too. I feel like my mind was so scattered in that conversation. I do apologize. We actually pulled the interview up by 5 days and I just felt underprepared. And so I apologize for that. And I hope it was coherent. My answers were even more long-winded than usual, but I hope you enjoyed getting to know him. He, of course, did an amazing job. I will put a link in the show notes to The Light We Give, How Sikh Wisdom Can Transform Your Life. It has transformed my life just through being near him. And I also put a link to his other book, which is a children's book. We didn't even get to mention it, which is Folger Singh Keeps Going. It's a wonderful book. My girls love it. It's about running and it's just really great. So I'll put a link in the show notes to that and also to our sponsors. So you can be sure to go check those out in the show notes by going to runningforreal.com/episode 308. Thank you so much for listening, my friends. I appreciate you. I will see you next week for another episode.